A lot of the mail order bride is that. And so now we're finding out that they are not, in many cases, bringing the women over to use the women. They're using their children. So they are purposely getting women that have children, male and female children, and they use those male and female children in the ways they want to. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a child that you'll find an article about out there. It's a little Guatemalan girl. And in this case, the police were very effective and trained. And I'm so grateful that we are getting training and good work out of many of our law enforcement. What happened is they saw a car going down I-90, pretty deserted highway, and it had a big GPS system in the front. And it had a lot of decals hanging in the back. So you couldn't see into the car very much. So the car was speeding, so they stopped it for that, and they also stopped it for obscured vision. And they said to the guy in the car, who didn't speak English, they said, why is that little girl huddled in the back seat? And he said, because he doesn't know English very well, I'm taking baby to Worthington. That's the words out of the police report. Taking baby to Worthington. So he was taking her, and the police asked him, do you know her language? No. The driver did not know the language of the child he was transporting. Do you know about her? Do you know her mother? Do you know her father? He didn't. But he said, there's going to be 2 men up at the next truck stop, and they're going to take her, and they know more about her. So the troopers said, okay, let's go. And they questioned the 2 men, and they did not know her language, and they did not know enough about her to be taking her. So they took her and put her into foster placement, and she's very, very well taken care of now. They prosecuted, and the man that was originally taking her had already been deported 12 times. So he is transporting so many people. Now, how many people here know a person that speaks Mom? Do you? Wow. I never knew anybody that spoke Mom before, but now, it's a small Mayan tribe in Guatemala, desperately poor and desperately isolated, and now there's 800 of them all of a sudden in South Dakota. So this man that has 12 deportations has been busy. So this is what we're up against. It's going to be constant. We have to improve our laws every day. We have to work on them. We have to tell our law enforcement that we want the victims to be treated as victims. We have to understand the victimization and be the person of trust. Most of all, be the person of trust. the person that someone else would go to if they had some questions or were in trouble. So, thank you so much for listening. How about some questions? Why don't they arrest the Johns and take them to jail? Okay, the Johns, which in Minnesota law are called patrons. Yes, patrons. Doesn't sound like a big criminal, does it? But anyway, you know, there are undercover police officers that do arrest Johns. And that's how it is done, Jane. And I kind of understand this. If there's a child, and let's say there's a John, and they catch the John, they would have to probably do what's called a rape kit on the child. And that's very invasive and very psychologically damaging for a child. And it might not, when they use these children, it's over and over and over again. And so the tests may not come out for all of that anguish that the child would endure. The tests may not be ones that work. So, yes, what Jane said is in Sweden it's against the law to buy and sell human beings. Yeah, that's true. Shelters. Okay, there's different classifications of shelters. This is a very important question. The shelters are, some are called homeless shelters. And they have to qualify for Section 8 or something like that, MA or something to get into. Then there's county shelters, where you'd have to be a resident of a county, and those would be oftentimes domestic abuse shelters. And then there's sexual assault shelters, and sometimes they're both. And then there are shelters that are privately run. So in Minnesota, we have many, many shelters. We have over 150. And some of them are really great for many of the victims we find. And we form strong relationships with those shelters. Mostly they're not homeless shelters. Homeless shelters are pretty dangerous. And our victims are not strong, they need some sheltering. They have post-traumatic stress disorder. They're very vulnerable. So we put them, we think about the people, the shelters we have strong relationships with, and we think about the culture of the victim, the food. Food is important, and the food of the shelter. We also think about the safety implications for where the shelter is, and the access to the medical that the victim needs, and then the strong relationships that we have with certain shelters that we know treat our victims as victims. There are, we had a very unfortunate thing happen with someone that was picked up by the police, was put in a shelter, and an advocate came and said, "Your hoe's in jail now. How do you like that?" It is so demeaning. It is so wrong. It's so wrong to talk to a child like that. They are showing, there are evidence-based studies that show that trauma-informed care really needs to be used, and we train everybody on it. Lawyers, secretaries, social workers, we train everybody in strength-based, trauma-informed work. We do not question what happened with a child. until that child is able to handle that. We protect them until they're able to handle things. And but there's just many other techniques that we train on. So the difference between treating a victim with the trauma-informed care is the difference between success and failure. And there's a lot of failure. If they're put into a homeless shelter and not kept safe, there'll be failures. If they don't get drug or alcohol treatment in a safe environment, there'll be failures. If you let them be called a prostitute, you might as well write the kid off. There'll only be one job they can do the rest of their lives. And so you just have to be vigilant with children, and you can succeed. Yes, many times when you treat a child in trauma-informed way, the child will go into more of the child protection part of the court instead of the juvenile justice part of the court. And if they go into the child protection, they're very experienced with, that, and then a judge can order it. And we go to court with these kids, and the judges and the prosecutors are so happy that we're there and saying, please consider that this child needs this or alcohol treatment. And please take that into consideration so that they can get what they need. And so it's really marvelous that way. What type of efforts are there to return the children to their families? We make a determination as to the safety of the families. The Guatemalan kid, her father is the one that sold her, and he was telling her that she had to go here and make money so her two younger sisters would be sent here using that money. So we determined that that was not a safe place to return her to, plus the abject poverty. And she had been marched through the desert with no food or clothing. She was actually, without water in the desert. And she was really in bad shape physically, and she didn't have warm clothing at all. And she had also been abused. Great, thank you so much.
Come hither stare that strips my conscience bare. It's witchcraft.